Valve's been working from home for about 2 years. Up until this point, Gabe Newell has stated that Valve was working at a depressed productivity level, and due to how work from home kind of splinters in already splintered organizations such as Valve, it's been difficult not only to find information on upcoming projects, but for Valve themselves to keep upcoming projects in development. And Aperature Desk Job released. Aperature Desk Job is an incredible 30-minute tech demo that showcases how to push buttons on your Steam Deck. I don't understand why they did it. Historically, on this channel, we tear apart any new piece of Valve software to try and find information and references regarding either what was canceled in the past or what is upcoming in the future. And I'm pleased to say that although on the artistic side of data, there's almost nothing that can really be extrapolated on the future of Valve, is the most fruitful data mine I have ever experienced as a journalist, as a passionate gamer. Of the major projects that were found within this data mine, 4 stand out: Citadel, some kind of follow-up to Half-Life Alyx, Counter-Strike Global Offensive's Source 2 port, and a recreation of the previously canceled Portal Paint game. Now, before going into what we found related to Citadel, please realize that any of the things we talk about could very well be meant for other projects, but with no discernible tags, it seems to all fit within this one game. Secondly, take everything that we're about to discuss with a grain of salt. Nothing is confirmed until Valve themselves announce it to be true. I don't understand how this much information was able to be accidentally leaked within Aperature Desk Job. You'll see what I mean. Citadel appears to be a Combines versus Rebels team-based, squad-based, class-based RTS FPS hybrid. The game appears to have a campaign, a single-player campaign, and the game has 2 major systems at play with a bunch of information scattering out of both systems: abilities and bots. Abilities are held items. Here are all the known types of abilities: weapons, weapon upgrades, weapon alt fires, ammo, grenades, passive player buffs, passive team buffs, passive squad buffs, active held abilities. Held abilities, like everything else, need to be attached to the player body, whether that be holstered in a weapon slot, whether that be on your back or on your sides, whether it be attached to your offhand, such as the gravity gloves, whether it be attached directly on, as the game puts it, your head or HMD. However, these abilities can also be placed on bots. The player takes control of a commander, a person who can take a look at the map from the top down and deploy bots, deploy teammates. These bots come in many different classes, and these bots can be squatted up into individual groups and controlled either individually as an entire set or in those individual squads. Each of those units can all have their own unique abilities granted onto them. These abilities are either given to the bots or player at the beginning of a round of Citadel or found throughout the game world. Some of these abilities are actively held, meaning you can't use anything else because your attention is now placed on this actively held ability. And seeing how everything that is done in this game is done in a very realistic, contextual setting, these actively held abilities aren't going to be gamified potions or buttons, they're going to be legitimate weapons of war. The abilities themselves are separated into different categories. You have an entire melee combat system at play with its own set of abilities. Of course, you have ranged abilities tying into both weapons and player actions. You have line of sight abilities, which require a specific target to be seen, either by the direct player or by one of the bots, with a specific cone of vision being represented to the top-down player. When a programmer or a scripter is creating some form of game rules, each of those variables that change different rules are usually commented. In programming speak, a comment is when you double slash and then write a note. The note won't be read by the compiler, but when reading the source code itself, there's a lot of information that can be gathered on exactly how the code is running. Somehow, A significant amount of Citadel code comments are just sitting in the Aperature Desk Job DLLs. Way too many to read through in this video. I picked out the best ones that talk about specifically abilities, and we're going to read through them. This is directly from Valve's gameplay programmers or scripters. Only usable if there aren't any squad mates within this range of our enemy target. Useful for preventing explosive attacks from damaging squad mates. Only used for held abilities. Never drop this ability. Always immediately remove it instead. Only used for held abilities. Should be the desired value of the weapon animgraph variable on this NPC when it is holding this ability. Should this ability attempt to suggest a schedule how to get into position in order to use it. An NPC can only seek to get one ability usable at a time. Should this ability be visible when other NPCs ask this ability's NPC what it's capable of. The amount of time after using this ability before it can be used again. The amount of time after using this ability before the NPC is allowed to use any of its abilities. The enemy location of this ability will use when gathering conditions to determine whether or not it can be performed. Last seen position is the last place we saw our enemy. Last known position is updated for a short time after lose sight of our enemy. So if our enemy ran around a corner, last seen position would be right before they vanished around the corner, and last known position would be around the corner and out of sight. The name of the last squad slot in a range of squad slots, one of which must be claimable to use this ability. If this is left blank, it'll be considered as matching the squad slot range minimum, meaning the ability will use a single squad slot. The NPC ability type to grant only grants it to NPCs which have been marked as being able to use this ability type. The type of ammo to grant to a player or NPC only grants it to players or NPCs who can use that ammo type. The view angle punch applied to a player when they receive a hit. Angle is specified as punch, yaw, and roll. What angle relative to the eye's direction does that target have to be in to use the ability? When building a path to a target, avoid our enemy by this distance. When calculating the aim spread, should this ability apply the current aim refinement value of the wielding NPC? When checking for flinch movement clearance, this is the minimum distance that must be clear for us to do a small flinch. If this distance isn't clear, we'll do a stationary flinch. When cooling down yourself, or squad mates, if this name is specified, it will cool down all abilities with the same scope name. Useful to put all grenade throws on a shared cooldown, for example. When firing at the player, this weapon allowed to miss and hit interesting targets nearby for visual flair. When targeted, it causes the ability to run ability-specific pre-targeting code, used for two-staged hits. For example, a leap or spot where the attack commits to a direction before it's actually performed. Body location to inherent from the owning NPC. If unspecified, the ability body location is used. The bots have a dynamic behavior system, a mood and memory system that changes how they act, how they react to things as a game of Citadel progresses. Again, to code comments. Behavior data is the ammo type, only grants it to players who can use that ammo type. Behavior data is the NPC ability type to grant, only grants it to NPCs which have been marked as being able to use this ability type. Behavior data is the player weapon type to grant. Behavior data is unused. Ammo type of the dropped NPC ability is granted. Only grants it to players who can use that ammo type. Behavior data is unused. Secondary abilities attached to this drop ability are also granted. Only grants it to NPCs which have been marked body locations on the owning NPC to use for gathering line of sight conditions from. Behaviors also come in the form of dislikes, likes, hate, and fear towards other players. A bot can also have a nemesis. These bots have a structured schedule that can be interrupted by abilities and other player actions. We don't know how these schedules are created, but they are dynamic. They're procedural. Bots have a sliding scale of aggression, moving from high, low, medium, very high, and very low. Their aggression state dictates how they're going to react to other enemy NPCs or players. What's interesting is the player themselves, or at least one of the players in a multi-number player game, can either be the commander, looking down on the whole playing field and effectively treating the game like an RTS, or they can jump into a first-person shooter and not only play as the commander on the field, but also take over for any of the bots on the play space. There's a bunch of different types of damage. You have blast damage, heavy and light damage, melee damage, physics damage, and shock damage. And the shock damage is actually a stun. It appears to be some form of non-lethal. And one of the player roles that can exist in the game is the observer. The observer is effectively a spectator, but a spectator who communicates with the team as almost reconnaissance to produce information for the rest of the team. They can take freeze camp, but they can also deploy passive drones just to be able to get more data within the play space during a game of Citadel. Drivable vehicles appear to be part of this game. They're either player spawned through some means, or they're just found throughout the world, and either the bots or the player can drive those vehicles. And the HUD, at least for the commander, gives a lot of information all at once. Each bot on the field can have the body locations, combat state, total enemies on the map, kills, nearest AI node, current route, task, and view cone available to the commander at any time. Even though it appears through a lot of references to the Combine and the Rebels within this Datamine that the base game is very much themed around Combine versus Rebels. That could be great. The rule set is agnostic. The rule set doesn't necessarily mean that the game will forever just be a 7 Hours War retelling. It could very much be an episode 2 dwindling Combine versus a bolstered Rebels. It could be the HECU versus the scientists. Hell, it could be red team versus blue team. Of course, we know a whole lot more about Citadel with behavior states and the mini-map and, expanded ambient occlusion and bot pathing. And we made a video about Citadel back in November. Link to that right there if you want to catch up with everything we knew before this period of time. Thank you very much for watching. Check out my merch store if you want to be able to support me. You can always check out my live streams. I stream every day. On a personal note, I'm actually on a path of self-improvement. I've gone through a lot of deep mental health stuff, and I honestly feel like I'm on the upswing, and it's great to be back doing data mines and future Valve predictions and stuff. So here's to Citadel, the next Valve codename. The game's not going to be called Citadel. It's like how we used to call Half-Life Alyx HLVR. Anywho, I'm the Passionate Gamer, Tyler McVicker. I hope you have a good day. Tell your loved ones you love them, and I'll see you next time. Adios.